My brother's cruelty shattered our family, and the Christmas gift was the final heartbreak I faced. That holiday, standing with a gift in my hands, I realized some wounds are too deep to heal, even during the season of peace. I hadn't planned on coming home for Mother's Day this year. I live across the country now, far away from the town I grew up in, and in many ways far away from the people I used to be closest to. But my mother had insisted. Her voice over the phone had the kind of tremble that reminded me of childhood. The kind that used to mean something was wrong, even if she never said it aloud. So I booked the ticket. One weekend. I told myself I could survive one weekend. What I didn't expect was that this trip would be the last time I saw my brother as the person I once knew. Or maybe more truthfully, it was the moment I finally let go of the version of him I had clung to for far too long. James was always the older brother who had a loud opinion about everything. When we were kids, he was the one who turned arguments into competitions and never backed down, not even when he was wrong. I used to admire that confidence. But over the years, that confidence turned into something uglier, something rigid and self-righteous. He started identifying as a libertarian in college. I rolled my eyes at most of his rants about big government and taxes, but I never thought much of it. It felt more like a phase, or maybe just a way for him to sound smarter at parties. But this was something else entirely. It began innocently enough. A family dinner. My mother's roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the same old china plates that had survived decades of holidays and fights. We were seated at the table, James, his wife Karen, my parents, and me. I could feel the tension before the conversation even turned political. Maybe it was in the way James avoided eye contact, or how Karen had that tight-lipped smile she reserved for me. Or maybe it was just my own gut already preparing for impact. The topic of immigration came up first. James launched into a tirade about violent criminals being deported, painting entire communities with one sweeping venomous brush. It was like watching a caricature come to life, every talking point I had ever heard from Fox News, but now coming from the mouth of my own brother. I tried to stay calm. I really did. Not everyone being deported is a criminal, James, I said quietly, taking a sip of wine. I suddenly wished were whiskey. They wouldn't be getting deported if they didn't break the law. He shot back, his tone sharp. And don't start with the sob stories. I'm tired of liberals crying over people who don't even want to assimilate. Karen nodded in agreement. My mother looked down at her plate. My father chewed in silence. But these are families, I said louder now. People who've lived here for years. Children. They're being ripped apart. And whose fault is that, he snapped. Maybe if people followed the rules, this wouldn't be happening. Actions have consequences. My heart pounded. The room felt like it was closing in. I glanced at my mother, hoping she'd say something, hoping she'd intervene, but she just smiled nervously and said, "Let's just eat." Okay. It was then that the conversation shifted towards something even more personal. James started mocking the Palestinian protests on college campuses, calling them pro-Hamas rallies, and accusing the students of being brainwashed. I felt my blood boil. "You're reducing an entire group of people to extremists," I said. "You don't even understand the history. You're parroting hate without any context." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Oh, and I suppose you do. What, because you live in California now, you think you know better than the rest of us? It's not about where I live," I snapped. "It's about basic human rights, James. Something you clearly don't care about anymore." Then, like a knife through my ribs, the conversation turned to queer rights. James rolled his eyes and said something about how Trump was the most pro-gay president we've ever had. I laughed, actually laughed, but it came out more like a gasp. "You can't be serious," I said. He was. Dead serious. He went on about how he didn't believe trans rights were under attack, that most of it was liberal media propaganda, and how the pride flag doesn't belong in schools anyway. At that point, I was shaking. "I'm queer, James," I said, my voice trembling. "You're talking about people like me. You're defending policies and rhetoric that literally put people like me in danger." He looked at me with something between pity and contempt. "Don't be so dramatic. No one's trying to hurt you." "But they are," I said, "and you don't care." He shrugged. "You've always been too sensitive." There it was, the final nail. The confirmation that whatever bond we had left had already rotted away. I stood up from the table. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "I'm done," I said, turning away. No one stopped me, not even my mother. I went upstairs to the guest room and cried. I cried for myself, for the version of James I missed, for the family I no longer recognized, and for the realization that maybe love wasn't enough to bridge the chasm that had formed between us. By the time I left the next morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to try anymore. I wasn't going to debate or explain or educate. I was done giving grace where none was given in return. I was done bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer me a bandage. But as Christmas approached, I realized there was one loose thread I hadn't figured out how to tie up, yet the gift. Time passed, but the wound from that Mother's Day visit didn't heal. If anything, it festered. I went back to my life on the West Coast, resumed my job, my routines, the familiar rhythm of solitude and chosen family. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just disappointment anymore, it was grief. The kind of grief that sneaks up on you when you lose someone who's still alive. I didn't talk to James after that visit. I didn't respond to the occasional group texts he sent, didn't like the photos of his new pickup truck, or the backyard he was proudly landscaping. I muted his and Karen's Facebook profiles, and avoided family Zoom calls where I knew they'd be present. I told myself I was protecting my peace, but the truth was uglier. I couldn't stand the sight of them. Then December rolled in cold and relentless, and with it came the question I had been avoiding for months. Christmas. My family always did Christmas big garlands on every railing, lights covering the entire front lawn, sugar cookies in tins stacked high on the kitchen counter. It was my mother's favorite holiday, and she clung to it like it could hold the family together by sheer force of nostalgia. And for her sake, I had always returned, even when things were tense, even when I felt like an outsider in my own home. This year, I had considered skipping it altogether. But when Mom called and her voice cracked just a little while, she talked about hanging the ornaments. I knew I'd go. Not for James, not for Karen, just for her. But that didn't solve the problem. The gift. Every year, we all exchanged presents. Nothing extravagant, just thoughtful things. James would get me something like a beard grooming kit or whiskey glasses. I usually got him a book or a gadget for the grill. Karen liked candles and charcuterie boards. It was tradition. A way to show we still cared even if we didn't say it out loud. But this year, I didn't want to care. I didn't want to pick something nice. I didn't want to pretend everything was okay when the truth was I couldn't even stand to be in the same room with them. And yet, not giving a gift at all felt too loud, too pointed. My parents would notice, and while they might not say anything directly, their disappointment would hang in the air like smoke. My mother would look at me with that quiet, wounded expression, and my father would clear his throat and change the subject. They were masters of denial. Confrontation was not in their vocabulary. So I found myself caught in the middle of a dilemma that felt both petty and colossal. What do you get for someone whose very existence makes your skin crawl? How do you choose a gift for someone who denies your identity, your humanity? I went through phases. First came the sarcastic ideas, a copy of Gender Queer, a mug with a rainbow flag and the words "Get over it," a shirt that said, "Pronouns save lives." I even considered a donation in their name to a queer youth shelter. I imagined the look on James's face when he opened the card, the way his jaw would tighten, the flush in his cheeks. It was satisfying to fantasize about. But deep down, I knew that kind of pettiness wouldn't change anything. It would just make Christmas miserable for everyone, and my mother didn't deserve that. Then came the passive-aggressive options. A blank notebook. A pair of socks. Something so completely neutral it bordered on meaningless. But even that felt dishonest. I couldn't bring myself to wrap something with care when I felt so much contempt inside. I called my best friend Luca one night while pacing my apartment. "Don't get him anything," he said bluntly. "He doesn't deserve a gift from you." I know, I sighed. But I don't want to blow up Christmas. My mom still pretends everything's fine. She's not ready to face what's really happening in this family. Then get her something amazing. Put all your effort into her gift. Let James fade into the background. But that still means getting him something, I murmured. Even if it's symbolic. Even if it's nothing. Luca was quiet for a moment. Then make it reflect who you are. Don't perform for them. Don't shrink yourself just to keep the peace. It stuck with me, that phrase. Don't shrink yourself. For so long, I had played the role of the accommodating one. The bridge builder. The soft-spoken brother who didn't rock the boat. Even in pain, I had tried to be palatable. But that Mother's Day had burned something out of me. I wasn't sure I could play nice anymore. So I decided I would give him something, but it would be honest. And if he chose to be offended by it, that was his burden to carry, not mine. I went to a local queer-owned bookstore the next day. I wandered through the shelves with shaking hands, unsure of what I was even looking for. Then, tucked between a memoir and a graphic novel, I found a slim volume titled How to Have Impossible Conversations, a very practical guide. I flipped through the pages. It wasn't angry or militant. It was measured, intelligent. A toolkit for navigating hard truths with people who refuse to see them. It didn't pander, but it didn't scream either. Perfect. I wrapped it in plain paper. No ribbon, no card. I placed it under the tree when I arrived at my parents' house 2 days before Christmas. My heart pounded the whole time. That night at dinner, James barely acknowledged me. Karen avoided eye contact. My mother chatted nervously about cookies and cousins. My father grunted through his meal. The air felt thick, like we were all underwater. I smiled tightly and said nothing. The gift sat there in silence, waiting. It was going to be a very long holiday. I didn't expect anyone to be awake when I got there. It was just past 7 a.m., and the street still shimmered with that soft winter blue hush that only exists on Christmas morning. My mother's porch light was on, casting long shadows across the frost-covered steps. I hesitated, fingers tightening around the gift bag. I almost turned around. I almost got back into my car and drove away. But then the door creaked open, and there she was. "Come in before you freeze," my mother said, still in her robe, hair curled the way she always wore it on holidays. The house smelled the same cinnamon pine and something faintly burnt like cookies left in the oven too long. The tree was already lit, twinkling quietly in the corner of the living room, and the familiar ornaments, paper snowflakes, ceramic bells that lopsided Santa James made in second grade hung from the branches like ghosts of a better time. We didn't hug. I stepped inside and handed her the bag. "Merry Christmas," I said. She took it with a soft, unreadable smile. "You didn't have to come all this way." "I know." She motioned to the couch and I sat. She sat across from me, holding the gift, but not opening it yet. The silence between us was thick, but not cruel. Just tired. "I wasn't sure what to get him," I finally said. "I almost didn't get anything at all." She looked down at the bag. "You still love him." I sighed. "I don't even know who he is anymore. I didn't want to let it end on that note." She nodded slowly, her fingers brushing the edge of the gift bag. "He's not here, if that's what you're wondering." He and Karen decided to spend Christmas with her parents. Something in me unclenched. I hadn't realized I was bracing myself for a fight. "I left the tag blank," I said. "You can give it to him or not, I won't ask." She opened the bag and pulled out the box, unwrapped it gently. Inside was a hardcover book, an anthology of queer authors from the past 100 years. I had written a note on the inside cover, but I didn't ask her to read it. I wasn't even sure I wanted her to. Her hands lingered on the edges of the book. "He might not understand why you chose this." "I didn't buy it for him to understand," I said. "I bought it because I needed to let go." My mother looked at me, then really looked at me, and for a second I saw something crack in her. Not regret exactly, but recognition. The kind that comes when you realize your children are no longer yours to fix or mold or protect. "I'm sorry," she said. It was barely above a whisper. And maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe it didn't make up for her silence at the dinner table or all the other silences before it. But it was the first honest thing between us in a long time. We sat there for a while, not talking, just watching the tree lights flicker across the walls. Eventually, she reached for a box under the tree and handed it to me. "It's nothing big," she said. Inside was a scarf, hand-knitted in colors I actually liked, wrapped around a tin of tea I used to drink in high school. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead I smiled. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. The days after Christmas passed in a haze. I stayed a little longer than I planned, partly because the flights were overbooked, partly because I wasn't ready to go back to California and pretend everything was fine. I helped my mom take down the decorations. We didn't talk about James. We didn't talk about politics. We stuck to safe topics, recipes, weather movies we used to love. It was delicate, like walking barefoot across shards of glass. But it was something. On the night before I was supposed to leave, my phone rang. It was James. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. My mother glanced at me from the couch, but didn't say anything. Her knitting needles clicked faintly in the background like a soft metronome counting down. I answered. "What do you want?" I said, not bothering to sound warm. There was a long pause. Then his voice low and tense. Did you give Mom a book for me? I exhaled slowly. Yes. What the hell is this? He asked, his tone edging toward fury. You think this is some kind of statement? It's a book, James, I said. Read it or don't. It's not a trap. Did you write in it? My heart thudded. I did. Another pause. What the hell is wrong with you? He said louder now. You think this is about you being queer? You think I care? You made it pretty clear you didn't, I said, keeping my voice level. That's not the point. The note wasn't for you, James. It was for me. What the hell does that mean? It means I'm done. I'm done trying to make you see me. I'm done pretending we're the same people we used to be. That book. It's not a peace offering. It's a goodbye. Silence again. I could hear his breath through the line, shaky and angry. You're unbelievable, he muttered. You always act like you're better than everyone. Like you're some enlightened victim. I'm not a victim, I said. I just stopped tolerating being disrespected. You're my sibling, he snapped. That should still mean something. It used to, I said quietly. But love isn't a blank check, James. It has limits. And you've hit mine. He was quiet again. But this time the silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Then just before I could say anything else, he spoke. I didn't mean to hurt you. Something twisted in my chest. I don't think you did, I said. But that doesn't make it okay. I was angry, he said. You always come home and act like everything we believe is stupid. I don't think you're stupid, I said. I think you're scared. I think you've been fed lies and you believed them because they made you feel safe. But they're not harmless, James. They hurt people. They hurt me. He didn't answer. I waited. I'm not going to apologize for what I believe, he said eventually. I didn't ask you to, I replied. I just don't want to be part of it anymore. Another long pause. Well, Merry Christmas, he said flatly, and then hung up. I sat there, phone still in hand, staring at the screen. My mother had stopped knitting. She didn't ask what he said. I put the phone down, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of wine. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from something else, release maybe. Or exhaustion. My mother walked in a few minutes later. Do you want to watch something? She asked softly. There's a new documentary on Netflix about that painter you liked. I nodded. Yeah, that sounds good. We watched it together, sitting under a blanket, the TV casting cool light over the room. I leaned my head against her shoulder and she didn't pull away. It wasn't resolution. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. Back in California, the days stretched long and quiet. The soft hum of my apartment, once a comfort, now felt like the echo of something I had left behind. The holidays were over. My tree was still up, its lights blinking half-heartedly, too lazy to take down, too painful to enjoy. I kept looking at the card from my mother, the one that came in the mail after I left. It simply read, I love you. I'm proud of you, no matter what. That was all. I should have felt peace. But there was still something gnawing at me, a frayed thread I couldn't tie off. James, despite everything he'd said and everything I had said back there, was a part of me that still hoped. Not for reconciliation exactly, but for acknowledgement. Something more than that empty Merry Christmas at the end of our call. Something human. Then one rainy Thursday afternoon in January it came. An envelope. No return address. No handwriting on the front. Just my name, typed, not written. I almost threw it out with the junk mail, but curiosity tugged at me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. I read the book. I don't agree with it, but I understand now why you gave it to me. You're right, I've been cruel. I didn't mean to be, but that doesn't excuse it. I miss who we were. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it can be fixed. But if there's ever a time you want to talk, I'll pick up. That was it. No name. But I knew who it was from. I folded the letter slowly, setting it on the counter like it was something fragile. A ghost of a bridge. A maybe. I didn't cry. I didn't call him back. Instead, I sat by the window, watching the rain fall in crooked streaks down the glass. I thought about all the versions of us that had existed, 2 kids riding bikes down the block laughing too loud. 2 teens screaming at each other in the hallway. 2 adults trying, failing, hurting. Love doesn't disappear all at once. It dissolves. Slowly. In silence. It pulls away like tidewater, leaving behind the wreckage and shells of what used to be whole. But sometimes, If you listen closely, you can hear it return in tiny waves. This letter, it wasn't absolution. It wasn't even closure, but it was something. A beginning of an ending. Or maybe the end of the ending. Later that night, I lit a candle. Not out of habit, not for ceremony. Just because I needed something warm in the room. I curled up on the couch, wrapped myself in a blanket, and watched the flickering flame. I thought about who I had become, someone who had learned to let go, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't even always mean reconnection. Sometimes forgiveness is just the act of setting the burden down and walking away lighter. And maybe, just maybe, leaving room behind you in case someone else decides to follow. After hearing this story, I hope you feel the weight of family ties tested by hate and the pain of trying to hold on when everything seems broken. Sometimes love isn't enough, and we have to decide where to draw the line. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to Reddit Jury for more real stories that dive deep into the complexities of human relationships. Your support means everything and helps us bring more voices like this to light.